Tisha B'Av is never an easy day. Every year we sit on the floor and we mourn the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. But this year, in the shadow of Tzuk Eitan, Operation Protective Edge, this year, Tisha B'Av becomes perhaps more difficult than it is in other years. I'd like to share an idea from the Shem Mishmuel for this year's Tisha B'Av in particular. The Gemara tells us in Yuma, Daf Nun Daled Amud Bet, Amar Reish Lakish taught, B'sha'a shenichnesu nachrim lehichal, when the non-Jews entered the temple, the first temple was about to be destroyed. Ra'u kruvim ha'ma'orin zeh bazeh, when the non-Jews entered the Kodesh HaKodashim, when they went into that place that only the Kohen HaGadol went to once a year, they entered and they saw the Holy Ark. And when they saw the Holy Ark, they saw the Kruvim were facing one another. They were face to face. Now, this is unusual because we know the Gemara elsewhere in Bava Batra tells us that when the Jews were doing Ritzono Shel Makom, when we were doing the right thing, the Kruvim were facing one another. But when we weren't doing the right thing, when the Jewish people were sinning, then the Kruvim weren't facing one another, but they would face apart. It's difficult to imagine a more painful moment in Jewish history than the destruction of the temple. We suffer the scars of that traumatic moment until today, and we feel the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash every single day. At that moment of destruction, when the Nochrim, when they entered the Beit HaMikdash, how is it possible that they saw the Kruvim facing one another? Was that a moment of closeness? Was that a moment of love? Was that a moment of kindness between God and the Jewish people? How is it possible that at that moment the Kruvim were facing one another? The Shem Mishmuel suggests that the Gemara in Yuma that talks about the Kruvim facing one another, and the Gemara in Bava Batra telling us that they only face one another when there was love between the Jewish people and God. Those two Gemaras fit beautifully together, and they teach us together a very poignant idea that is more important perhaps this year than any other year. The Gemara teaches us, according to the Shem Mishmuel, that the most difficult times, sometimes the most challenging hours, are also the times of the deepest intimacy, the moments of deepest love. I had a taste of this experience about 2 weeks ago. About 2 weeks ago, on a Friday afternoon, one of our kinderlich fell over and he knocked out his teeth, 2 permanent teeth, and the blood was spreading quite strongly down his face, and together we rushed out to the only emergency dental clinic open in Jerusalem on a Friday afternoon. And as we were driving that short drive to the dentist, he was crying in an immense pain. And I was driving 10 minutes. During that journey, I could have been thinking, oh, why are you so careless? Didn't you see where you were going? Is that the way to behave? How could you allow that to happen to yourself? But you don't think about that at all. Do you know what parents think at that sort of moment? The only thing they think about is a deep love that they have for their child at that moment, that deep intimacy and closeness that we feel through bitter pain. The Kruvim faced one another as the temple was being destroyed because at that precise moment of pain, at that moment of destruction, there was a deep sense of intimacy and closeness between Am Yisrael and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Kruvim ha'ma'orin zeh bazeh, the Kruvim facing one another. Is there a more important idea to think about this year, during these days leading up to Tisha B'Av? We pray for the safety and the success of our brothers and sisters in the army. We think of their families back home. We think about the communities living within a few seconds of time to get to a bomb shelter, to get to safety. But we feel the intimacy and closeness 20,000 people that come to a levaya of someone they never met in Haifa. 30,000 people coming to a levaya of someone they never knew in Jerusalem. Thousands and thousands of people coming together at the Kotel. People you walk at the street, sitting on a bus. There's an intimacy among the Jewish people that we feel right now that we don't always feel. If you turn on the news on some radio stations here in Israel, when they finish the news, they don't conclude with the weather. They conclude with the Perek Tehillim. Why? Because at this moment of pain, there's deep intimacy. Tefillot go to places where they haven't been before. We feel a closeness with each other and a closeness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu as well. The Gemara in Megillah tells us, on Daf Hey, that Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi had a radical idea concerning Tisha B'Av. Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi wanted to uproot Tisha B'Av. Ratzah bikesh la'akor Tisha B'Av. He wanted to cancel, he wanted to finish Tisha B'Av. He said, why commemorate failure? If something doesn't go right, if things fail, why do I want to remember that? Close that chapter and move on. Bikesh la'akor Tisha B'Av. The Gemara goes on to explain exactly what he meant, but at first blush, he wanted to uproot Tisha B'Av. And the rabbis said no. Why did the rabbi say no to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi? We know the pasuk in Nahum, Lo takum pa'amayim tzara, that the same thing, same terrible tragedy, Lo takum pa'amayim tzara, we don't record it and recall it again and again and again. When tragedy strikes, we close that chapter and we move on and we try to build. But the rabbis say no, we do commemorate Tisha B'Av. But what do we commemorate? We commemorate not the destruction, but at that moment of destruction, there was intimacy. Kruvim ha'ma'orin zeh bazeh. Tisha B'Av is a day of intimacy. Tisha B'Av is a day of closeness between God and Am Yisrael. A moment where, within the deep, deep pain, we feel intimacy. Allow me to give us all a two-folded blessing this year with Tisha B'Av and Tzuk Eitan together. Our blessing for all of us is that we should feel the intimacy, feel the closeness that's happening right now through these difficult days. But ultimately, Hazorim B'dima Barina Yiktzoru, those who sow with tears should be blessed to reap with joy. That this should turn to be days of goodness, of joy, of celebration very, very soon. We should be blessed to dance together in Yerushalayim. B'mehera b'yameinu. Amen. Yishar koach.